importantly, any non-pecuniary interest. So any pecuniary interest, Councillor Bond.
I've got a pecuniary interest in item 10B and I'll leave the chamber for it.
10B, yeah, that's fine. Any non-pecuniary interest, Councillor Strawn?
Okay, item 16A, non-pecuniary.
16A, that's fine, thank you. Item 3, Town Mayor's announcements. So on Sunday the 9th of October, I attended the civic service in Flitwick. It was a very pleasant service hosted by Councillor Andy Snape and the ministerial team at their St Paul's and St Peter's Church in Flitwick. A good networking opportunity as well to have a chat with fellow mayors about some of the challenges that they're facing in their towns, and they are strikingly similar to some of the things that we're going through here in Biggleswade. Item 4, public open session. To adjourn for a period of up to 15 minutes to allow members of the public to put questions or to address the council pertaining to matters listed on the agenda. Each speaker will need to give their name to the chairman prior to speaking and will be given 1 3-minute slot. We don't have any members of the public in the chamber. Do we have any online, Helen? No. Okay, then I move on. Item 5, invited speaker. So it's a great pleasure to welcome representatives from Tritax Cemetery who are going to be giving us a presentation. So over to you, gentlemen.
I remember the button. That's good news. That's a good start. I think we've got 10 minutes, so I'm going to start my timer so we don't go over. But thank you. I recognise lots of faces in here. I think that everyone actually, but thank you very much for having us again to present to you this evening. Will, my colleague, and I are just going to talk about the Cemetery Park element of Stratton Business Park, so the commercial warehousing development there. I don't know who's flicking through the slides actually, but shall I just put my hand up when you, is that okay? If you want to go to the next one, I'm going to race through the first few, but very, very quick background, just as a reminder of who we are. We're ultimately a FTSE 250 developer. Our parent is the catchily named Tritax Big Box REIT, TBBR, if you want to have a look at it online. We are the largest owner of big boxes in the UK, and we're very much income focused. So people that buy shares in our REIT will benefit from the income that flows from the developments. And as a result of that, we are very much long-term investors and owners in property. So where we develop the sites, we, instead of a trader developer model where it's flogged on as soon as the lease completes, we retain ownership for many, many years. We've got 70 of the largest assets in the UK, and it's about a £6 billion fund. I think that's probably all you need to know about the business, unless you've got any questions later. Do you want to, I've sort of covered that, if you want to carry on. Just some of the names there that you'll recognise that we own the warehouses that they lease from us. You'll see Co-op on there, which is, we've got a number of Co-ops, one of which is in Biggleswade. And then in the bottom right, Noatum Logistics is our latest one, which is also in Biggleswade, which we'll come on to shortly. If you want to move on. So I just wanted to give you the context and a reminder of from the previous presentation. In 2017, we bought the 50-acre site that you now see the Co-op sitting on. And we, long story short, we eventually got there was an outline planning consent in place. We eventually got the detailed planning consent for the Co-op unit. So it's a 660,000 square foot unit. And they started occupying that in February 2021. So it's quite an interesting build during COVID, but we managed to deliver it on time, which is good news. They've got frozen, chilled and ambient in there, and they supply much of the southeast from that facility. There's a very large office block on this side of the unit, if you see that, on the east side of the unit by the P of the Co-op. Doesn't look very big from here, but it is when you're there and in person. So, there's a real range of training facilities in there, office-based staff, warehouse operatives, drivers, etc. There's quite 650 employees, and it'll probably rise to about 1,200 when it's fully operational. Do you want to move to the next slide? So this is Co-op's most sustainable UK logistics centre. It was built to BREEAM Excellent. We'll come on to net zero. This was actually developed before we developed a net zero carbon, but we'll go into that on the next phase. But it is effectively a highly insulated box of both office and warehouse facilities. The energy is generated, or the energy purchase is purely renewables. We're about to sign, hopefully with the co-op, to flood the roof with PV to provide energy to the facility. So that will initially supply co-op with renewable energy generated on site, and any spare that is left then feeds into the rest of the site, which is the sort of top right, which is a scarred green field there that you'll see that we'll come on to, is now 4 warehouse buildings. We've got a number of sustainable measures on site. We put EV charging points in on all our sites. We duct 100% of the car park so that we can future-proof it. If in 5, 10, 15 years everyone's got an electric vehicle, it can easily be fitted in the future. And there's a number of features internally which you can't necessarily see from here, but whether it's water-saving features, low NOx boilers, it's a highly insulated box which reduces airflow and preserves energy. So that's some of the headlines in terms of sustainability. Let's move to the next.
Okay, I think it's my turn now. Thank you, Tom. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. I just want to give a little update on phase 2, which we received planning permission for back at the end of 2020. We came to you in February of this year just to give an update on starting construction, and we're now coming to the end. So just a few key terms on the headlines of the development. So it's about 577,000 square feet over 4 units and about 45 acres. And we're completing these buildings as of this month. So Tom mentioned net zero carbon in construction. Back in 2021, Tritech Symmetry made an obligation to develop all new buildings to net zero carbon in construction, and Biggleswade is our first multi-unit scheme to be net zero carbon. Similar to the co-op, we will have PV on the roofs, and as you can see on the screen, there's 92 EV charging bays with ducting for the future spaces to be EV charging spaces. If you move to the next slide, I'll give you a quick update on our occupier progress. So a bit of history. In the background of this CGI, you'll see the Bond International unit. We pre-sold that prior to development. However, the next 3 buildings, we commenced development without an occupier. So we really believe in the strength of the location of Biggleswade, and it's been very successful so far. 87% of the scheme is let. So in August, as you can see on the right-hand side, we let that 230,000 square foot building to Novartin Logistics. That is their second building in the UK, and they will be doing sort of UK-wide logistics up and down the A1. And last week, we can announce that we let the building in the foreground, 160,000 square foot, to Bidfood, who are our national food supplier, and this will be their 25th facility across the UK. So I think it's worth mentioning now that the first 2 buildings to go of the 3 were the biggest ones. So there's been huge demand in the large scale units in Biggleswade. If we move to the next slide, this is just a bit of a progress on the development. As you can see, those photos were taken by drone a few weeks ago. This foreground building is the Bond International unit. And if you move to the next slide as well, you can actually see some of the construction workers on the roof. They look absolutely tiny. It shows the scale of the buildings. And if you move to the next slide now, we wanted to just touch on our community benefit fund. So back in 2021, we also committed to every new consented development having a community benefit fund, and Biggleswade phase 2 will, once completed, have over £50,000 to be deployed for local communities. And we want to engage with Biggleswade Town Council on how to deploy that money. And this is something we're doing across the country.
I think one thing I've been in touch with Ben Weldon on is football he's very keen to find a new site for a football pitch, but we can't necessarily help with that. But we might be able to help if they bid for funding towards the facilities and the pitch. So.
If you can move to the next slide, please.
So this is a sort of context plan, and forgive the fact that the buildings are actually either built or nearly completed, are just in plan phase here, but clearly you can see the co-op and then the phase 2 4 buildings. And as Will said, we're still 2 months until completion for those 4 buildings in phase 2, but with 87% of that is let. So there's, it's probably about 80 odd million pounds worth of GVA and investment in those buildings, and many hundreds of jobs created. And you have to remember, these warehouses, once they're built, they've got quite large offices within them. And they also have, facilities, and quite technical facilities, and automation and computers and supply chain management and what have you within them. So there's many tens of millions that go into the fit out of those. So what we want, so we've updated you on co-op and phase 2. And this is a sort of final part of the update with 30 seconds to go. We are about to submit a planning application for the next phase, which we've called phase 3, which is 928,000 square feet in 3 buildings. And basically, through co-op and phase 2, we've identified that there is significant demand from businesses wishing to grow in this area. There's absolutely nowhere else for them to go within quite a wide radius in terms of miles. I mean, even if you go as far as Bedford, there's very few buildings available, and so it's in response to the demand from the businesses and providing that economic growth and jobs. So that application is being worked up for submission this month. I just wanted to look at the key statistics here that they would be subject to planning, developed to net zero carbon in construction. They're highly green buildings with EV charging spaces, PV on the roofs, and we're also proposing significant public right-of-way improvements with this development. I think I've been choked off.
You can take a little longer. It's okay.
Sorry.
We don't.
Sorry.
10 minutes is a rough.
Is that all right?
It's fine. Carry on.
So we are proposing these public right-of-way improvements. So currently, one of the bridleways runs to the M1 adjacent to the site. A1 adjacent to the site, and again it comes to a dead end. So in forming the next phase of development, we're proposing to wrap both the public footpath and the bridleway around the site, looping back round towards the co-op. So it creates a mini green wheel, if you will, which will hopefully be used by riders, cyclists, and walkers, and obviously employees and workers at these sites. So really, I mean, I think that's probably the summary. But the floor's open to questions after this. But I just really wanted to state that we like to push the boundaries in terms of sustainable development. The government doesn't make us develop sustainably. I like to think that we keep pushing the boundaries here. We voluntarily developed a net zero carbon in construction and the BREEAM ratings that you see there. So we want to continue doing that and continue improving with every phase of development. I think that's it, really. If you'd like to ask any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. Yeah, I think we do have some questions. Councillor Brown.
Jonathan, you mentioned last time, you put our minds at ease when you talked about the traffic volume, because I'm looking at the road between Little and Alfords, and there seems to be no issues whatsoever since the co-op's open. Once we move on to phase 2 and phase 3, do you see any problems traffic-wise?
No, I mean, there's quite detailed traffic modelling, as you'll be aware, that happens for any planning application, and it's no different for phase 2 when we got the consent for that, and for phase 3, and so all that analysis will be submitted with the application for phase 3. So the roads are modelled, the junctions are modelled, and it's made sure that they're all within capacity. From our perspective, we don't want to develop a site clearly that causes traffic issues, because our customers, who will be there for many years, they simply won't want to locate there if there are traffic issues, because their vehicles will be queuing on the roads.
But all the traffic will be going towards that.
All the traffic will be running down Pegasus Drive and London Road. There are, as part of the application for phase 3, there are some minor amends being proposed, for example, outside Halford, as you mentioned, where it's a single lane at the moment turning left onto London Road towards the A1, not M1. That's proposed just to be slightly widened to make sure you can fit 2 vehicles there rather than 1. So there are a few tweaks, but that's just to help the traffic flows, really. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you. Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so my question is related to transport, but more around sustainable transport and cycling, walking routes and things like that. So as the site grows, there's obviously more people working there. Have you thought anything about how you might be able to contribute or support development of those sort of routes outside of the site itself?
Yeah, so no, it's a good question. I sort of touched on it during the presentation, but there's a bit more I could say on it, I suppose. So one is the improvements to the public right of way on site and creating more public right of way for both bridleway cyclists and walkers, and they all link into the other bridleways and footpaths locally linking to the town centre, so it creates a more sustainable site. We've also got, in terms of getting people to and from the site sustainably, as part of the application, we are proposing that we put in a bus stop on the site. So it means that the buses can continue round to the extended part of the site. Clearly, that's a benefit to the community and to the companies that locate there, and that they can get workers there sustainably. We put the CBC standard cycle racks in at all the buildings, huge numbers of spaces, to be quite honest, and we encourage those to be used. And the footpaths are 3 meters wide, so they're footpath cycleways. So you can actually take the cyclists. Clearly, the pedestrians will be off the main carriageway, but the cyclists can use those paths as well. So there's very good provision on site for sustainable transport, not to mention the EV charging if people do decide to use cars.
Thank you. No, good question. Councillor Strawn.
Thank you. It's very interesting to hear about the bus stop, because you need buses to go from bus stops.
Sorry, I didn't cover contribution. There will be a contribution towards buses.
So that's what I was asking, whether you'd actually be putting in a contribution. That was the other part of the question. I don't think I answered actually, but yes, we're in talks with Central Beds about the contributions to the bus services. Yes, so that'll be part of I expect a Section 106 contribution. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. Talking about the buses and possible new buses, I don't know whether, Tom, you were at the particular examination in public when we were talking about this, but I was pushing for more than the one bus from Home Farm, the other side of the A1. Okay. And it seems to me that we do need a bus that serves both Home Farm and Stratton Business Park. And the idea originally from the Home Farm development was to go to the station only. And I was pushing hard for the fact that it needs to go around all the large housing estates in the town if it's going to be useful for getting people to and from their work. So I hope you can push on that as well.
Yeah. I mean,
we haven't heard much about how Home Farm is going to be developed at the moment.
No, I think we're probably all in the dark in that. To be honest, I don't think there's a strategy there currently. But all I would say is it's, whether you're looking at it from a sort of sustainable or a selfish point of view, our customers who will be leasing these units will want to get employees to the units. Not everyone has a car, not everyone wants a car, and so we need to make sure that the buses cover the local residential areas. Yeah. And that's hopefully what the contributions will go towards, and we will try our best to influence that, but that's all in the discussions to come. Yeah.
Well, if I could carry on about what was discussed in the examination in public, and what's certainly something that I hope the Town Council will be pushing, and that's that piece of land between your development and the A1, which somebody at the examination in public was pushing to be added to the local plan as a site. Yes. Although the examiners wouldn't allow that, thank goodness. But I'm not asking a direct question because I'm not that daft, but somebody will take that site on. If it did happen to be Tritax, and you just need to be aware that with Home Farm one side and a possible site the other side, we would want very good screening, because what we don't want is the approach to Biggleswade on the A1 being through big sheds. It's not the vision of Biggleswade we want. So I just put that on the table so that I can make that point.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, not necessarily specific to that site, but the nature of our developments for warehousing is same with residential to an extent. You strip the topsoil, you then, for warehouses which are much larger than houses, clearly you've got to create a flat plateau. Therefore, the material gets pushed to the side. So, and as warehouses are slightly taller, it's a great opportunity to produce landscape bunds around warehouses which have a good depth of topsoil on there, which are planted up to create biodiversity, and so you tend anyway to have wider landscaping, I would say, down those corridors. And I would imagine Home Farm would have a reasonable width corridor down the A1. Yeah.
Well, as I say, that's what we'll be pushing for, and we haven't got any details of Home Farm yet. Thank you.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you. Two quick questions, if I may. Firstly, you mentioned net zero in construction. I wondered if you could just explain that a bit to me, because I can guess what it is, but I'd really like to hear that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, sure.
And then, sorry, I'll give you both questions. And then the second question was around the 106 and the bus funding. So it's great to hear that you're negotiating that with Central Beds. I think in the past we've seen that funding buses with 106 money isn't particularly sustainable in the long term, because when the money runs out, the buses stop. Would it be possible to explore more sustainable options so that the bus, rather than running for 5 years or 10 years, could actually run forever, essentially? And is there some mechanism to discuss that?
I think probably on the bus point, and what we've found elsewhere is that when you've got a certain quantum of development, which at Stratton Business Park you already do, ignoring our additional development, it means that the bus services tend to eventually pay for themselves. And clearly that's the aim. But I would expect that with any future phases of development for our phase 3 will contribute towards, say, for example, 5 years of running the buses, or contributions towards that. And then in 5 years' time, they might be developing Home Farm, which would mean there should be a 106 there. That will get the wider bus service up and running and make it a viable service, because that's surely the aim, isn't it? The other thing is, eventually possibly occupy, our customers in the warehouses may, in some parks they subsidise buses to get their employees to work. So I think it's one of those that's, if it's funded up front, that's great because it gets up and running, but it needs close monitoring through the operational period to ensure it is a viable service long term. But yeah, I can understand your point and concern. But ultimately, our customers want employees to get to work.
We've just seen it happen a lot.
And then it needs to be a mixture of walking, cycling. There will be cars inevitably, and buses and sustainable transport.
So going back
possibly
to
even horses, in fact, because it's a problem.
Autonomous buses, hopefully, which might be a way of reducing the operating costs. So going back to the net zero in construction, what does that really mean?
Do you want to do that one?
Absolutely. So net zero carbon in construction is what we do in all of our future developments now. Clearly, it's a logistics warehouse. There's a lot of steel and concrete. So it is done partly by offsetting through sustainable energy creation, wind farms being one example. However, it's also in the use of more sustainable materials in our buildings. So we build as a minimum BREEAM very good, and also the co-op was BREEAM excellent. So that is procuring better materials that produces carbon in their production.
I think just to add to that, and that's absolutely right on net zero. But the other side is that personally we want to advance on net zero credentials, because it's in everyone's interest as individuals, and we should be doing that. But equally, we are a FTSE 250 fund, so we have investors, very large investors in fund, into your pension funds and my pension funds and others, and there's a lot of pressure at that level on ensuring sustainable developments, greener funds, hitting certain targets in terms of those credentials. So we, there are measurements in the fund of the GRESB ratings and others, which, if you go on our Tritax Big Box website, you'll be able to see quite a lot of information on that, and we're market leading in that sense. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Well, good evening. I see that you've emphasised a lot that there's going to be EV points around the site. There's growing support now for people that would want to fuel their cars with hydrogen. So is there any alternatives or any spaces reserved for using that rather than just the EV vehicles?
I think, I don't actually know how a hydrogen car refuels other than possibly a fuel station. I don't know, but all I would say is that electric vehicles are currently in the market and being used, and infrastructure is put into future-proof for future electric vehicle charging in the car parks. I guess as and when it comes, there's a reasonable amount of space there. So one would hope that, if there had to be a tank, for example, for hydrogen, then that would be able to be fitted, and then there's room for that infrastructure to go in. And then in terms of, I think it's probably almost more relevant for the yard, actually, the service yards, because having HGVs run off electric, I just don't think is particularly sustainable, to be quite honest. Each truck with a 5-ton battery on it that takes a long time to charge just doesn't seem quite right. So I think trucks are more likely to go towards hydrogen, and the yards are 50-55 metres deep and are quite large areas to allow that manoeuvrability. And there are areas left for kit and plant and bin stores and possibly hydrogen tanks in the future. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think we found this very, very interesting. And as a council, we're taking more and more interest in what's going on at Stratton Business Park. It's grown a lot over the years, and I know it's to the benefit of our residents. Offering them great employment opportunities near where they live, and no doubt there are many other market towns in the country that would be desperate for this kind of investment. So I think we're very grateful for it. What were the timelines that we're looking at for phase 3? Sorry, could you just run those by us again?
Sure, yeah. So phase 3 application will be submitted this month.
Yep.
And then we'd hope to get to planning committee very early next year, I would hope. But you've seen from the timescales of phase 2, between getting planning in November 20 and completing the buildings now, it's pretty much a 2-year process.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, we look forward to inviting you back to see how that goes, perhaps post planning committee, and we look forward to continuing this dialogue, and particularly over the community benefit fund. I think you've cited Biggleswade FC there, and we don't need to go into a lot of detail about that this evening because I know some of it is quite sensitive. But I think we'd be keen to have a dialogue there with you because we are struggling badly for one of our sports teams particularly, but others as well. So thank you ever so much, and we look forward to seeing you perhaps in the new year.
Great, I look forward to it, and the offer's there if you'd like to come and have a look at the site when we finish phase 2 current construction and have a look at Co-op. Very happy to meet you there, put on a bus, or and take you around it so you can see what we've done. I think we'd be very keen for that. Perfect. Good. Any excuse to get the hard hat out. Thank you. Lovely.
Plenty of them.
Thank you very much. No need to stay for the rest of the meeting. We have more business to get through. Thanks so much. Have a nice evening. Thank you. So I'll move on to item 6 then. So we have members' questions. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Knight.
Thank you. I spotted on social media today a post from the Town Council. In summary, Town Council recently secured significant funding from Central Beds to improve CCTV provision. The location of CCTV cameras is currently being considered. Further updates in due course. My understanding is TCM and then subsequently full council agreed the exact location of 8 fixed cameras and 1 mobile. So I was wondering if officers could clarify the meaning of that post on social media, please.
Ellen, do you want to clarify that? Sorry, that's all right. So this was a comment about something on social media, which was that we haven't confirmed the location of cameras yet, but Councillor Knight thinks that we have. Did we want to just clarify that? It could be an innocent misunderstanding.
Thanks. It is, I think, an innocent misunderstanding. We have agreed, as Councillor Knight said, specific locations and as part of the strategy, and of course indeed we'll be reporting on them for next week, so I'm not entirely sure why the location point was worded that way on the post.
If it would be possible to adjust that, because quite a lot of members of the community are now responding, suggesting locations for where the cameras could go, which is perhaps not helpful.
Not really, we've already,
Thank you.
All right, thank you, understood. Councillor Woodhead.
Hi, thanks. Obviously, it's been hot off the press news this evening, but I'm aware that the coronation of King Charles III will now be on the 6th of May in 2023. Obviously, it's only just been announced today, but it's just more a case of, I guess in due course, we'll have to have a group some part of TCM or something, a working group about what we're going to do potentially for the coronation, whether that's an event or whether that's some sort of, I don't know, memorial or something. I don't know how we're going to mark it in some way, but I just wanted to get that on the agenda because clearly that is actually not that very long away now as well. And
no doubt.
We did so much for the Jubilee. I feel it's appropriate now for the coronation to come. So
no doubt there will be some official guidance. I understand that it is actually on the agenda for TCM. Which is next week. So we'll start the conversation then. Thank you, Councillor Woodhead. Okay, any other members' questions? Councillor Russell.
I don't know whether we've got anywhere with finding out what's happening with the closure of Station Road that's being broadcast and is on the notice by the junction with Back Street. It says that Station Road from Back Street to the station is going to be closed from 20th of October to the 17th of November. And I think what we need to know is, what does that mean for access to the houses in Saffron Road, to our town hall, to the houses off of Saffron Road? Are they going to make Saffron Road two-way in the meanwhile? How are people going to get to the station? I mean, I don't think we've had any notification of that, and I would hope that we can find out fairly quickly what on earth is going on.
No, I see from officers' reactions that we haven't had any communication related to that. So I think we have a little bit of a vested interest given the location of this building, but also a wider interest in what it means for our residents as well. So I think actually we just do need to be clear about that because it's potentially very disruptive for access to the town hall, but also for some of our neighbours here on Saffron Road. That's a very good point. Thank you, Councillor Russell. Any other members' questions? No. Okay, so we're moving on. So item 7A, for members to receive the minutes of the Town Council meeting from September the 27th. We're going through these for accuracy first of all. So page 1 of the minutes is page 7 of the deck. So I'm on page 7. Any comments on accuracy on page 7? Page 8. Page 9. Page, oh, sorry, Councillor Foster. Sorry, Councillor Foster. Yep, that's fine. Anything else on page 9? Page 10. Sorry, I'll go slower. Councillor Strawn.
Yes, halfway down page 10, item 220144-1. I think the better phrase rather than adopted would be confirmed for the standing orders, because the standing orders were in place, so they weren't actually being adopted again. They were being confirmed as.
Right, okay. No, I'm sure that's fine. Anything else on page 10? Page 11? Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. On the first line, it was resolved that the minutes of the meetings contain important context and decisions for the meeting. It should read, may only contain important context and decisions of the meeting.
Only contain. Yep. That's fine. Anything else on page 11? There's a huge set of minutes to get through, so there's inevitably going to be one or two things. Anything on page 12? Councillor Strawn.
Yes, top item 220114-7. It's Hitchmead Road, not just Hitchmead.
Yeah, it's fine. That was actually me who made that mistake, because it was I actually corrected these minutes originally, and I think I accidentally removed road. So sorry about that. Anything else on page 12? Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17, Councillor Pullinger.
In the top item, the relating to the car parking, so I believe we removed item A from the actual proposal because we hadn't got clarity on whether there was a planning requirement for charging. And in fact, the letter that was sent didn't include that, so that would tend to agree with me.
Okay, yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it was more about a bit of exploratory work, and I think that might have been really with councillors rather than with officers to confirm whether or not there were specific planning conditions around it, because we seemed a little unsure in the meeting, if I remember correctly. So I think that minute probably does need to change slightly, but it is still relevant, because I believe it was Councillor Strawn who mentioned whether or not certain things were in the planning permission. Sorry, Councillor Pullinger.
Yeah, so it definitely was mentioned.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think ultimately when we got to the resolution, it was agreed to remove that, and that members would look into it, and we would visit again at a later date should we think that was a valid point.
No problem. Okay, fine. So I think we actually just bring A down to the bottom somewhere to mention that there's sort of an action there for councillors, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to make sure it's minuted properly, that's all, because we don't want to remove it altogether. So anything else on page 17? Page 18? Page 19? No. Okay, are we happy that these are a true and accurate record of the meeting? Yes, thank you. Item 8, matters arising, same set of minutes. Page 7, matters arising. Page 8. Page 9, 10, Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. Under item 220144.1, standing orders. So we did resolve to adopt those or to confirm those standing orders. However, when I look on the website where they've been updated, when I look at standing order 29, we actually removed standing order 29 in relation to members standing during meetings on the 9th of March 2022, I think it is, rather than 2021. I have noticed an error in the minutes that we haven't noticed. But when we did that, we removed that standing order, but on the website it still refers to members standing.
Okay.
So officers, I think, need to check.
Yeah, let's just double check. We've got the absolute up-to-date version that we did approve. That sounds sensible. Thank you, Councillor Pullinger. Any further matters arising on page 10? Page 11, Councillor Brown.
The warm spaces item, 114.4. A meeting took place of community leaders, and it was decided to build on the good practice that already exists. So the churches, the library, and to keep the project small as such, so it's manageable, and then react as needs are. So in essence, they're not considering using the council's offer at this stage, nor the Weatherly Centre, but they're hoping to promote via leafleting all the opportunities or all the needs that are available, and local phone numbers where people can call on upon help.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Thank you for that update. I look forward to seeing how that progresses, and we'll certainly look out for those leaflets. Anything else on page 11? Page 12? Page 13? Page 14? Page 15? Councillor Bond.
Item 20-014517, planning appeal. Can I have confirmation this has been sent out, and if so, when? Because we were going to be writing to actually support the CBC in the appeal.
Yes, this is to the inspector. Am I right in thinking? Yes. Yeah. This has gone out, hasn't it, Karim? Yes, it has. Okay. Thank you.
Well, we actually sent it to. Sorry, excuse me.
Go on.
But we sent it via the online application.
Yeah, we sent it directly to the inspection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we just need to remember to be very clear as when members are considering a planning appeal, that we need to make clear that it goes to the inspector. Obviously, it has done in this case, but when we're considering this volume of planning applications, we need to be careful. So that's a good spot. Page 16, Councillor Foster.
Yeah, it's just with regard to the Asda car parking time, as you know, a matter very close to my heart. I just wonder if you've had any reaction at all from the letter that's been sent, and what our plan is for the next move if nothing happens. I'm very keen that if necessary, we take legal action, if we can take legal action, to make sure that this doesn't just get swept away.
I think we have this on this agenda. Can we deal with this under items for information? Is that all right, Councillor Foster? Yep, that's all right. Anything else on page 16? Page 17? Matters arising on page 18? Page 19? No. Okay, thank you. Item 9. Items for consideration. 9A, bus services. So this is an agenda item at the request of Councillor Strawn to consider the Town Council's approach to the proposed withdrawal of 2 bus services to and from Bedford in view of the impact on residents and businesses of Biggleswade and surrounding towns and villages. Councillor Strawn, did you want to speak to this? Although I understand that Central Beds have been in touch with another bus provider who is looking to cover those routes, albeit not like for like, certainly very similar. Did you want to speak, Councillor Strawn?
Yes, to a certain extent, it's been overtaken by events, but at the time, we didn't know what the result was. So I welcome the intervention the Central Beds Council have made, but I am concerned that we still haven't got a good enough bus service serving the people of this town, getting people to and from the town centre. Central Beds are spending a considerable sum of money on a new bus station, as we've already alluded to with the Station Road closure. And I would hope that when we have our joint JMC meetings, that we keep the issue of the buses on the agenda. I felt it's absolutely essential that we as a town council were at least seen to be addressing the issue. And as at the time I raised the question, we didn't know the result, I felt that it was appropriate to raise it in council. We've seen Sandy Town Council being quite vociferous on their side, and quite understandably, but we're slightly at the back end of that. And it's in Bedford's interest, and I mean Bedford Borough Council's interest, to get more people into Bedford from Biggleswade in the same way as we want more people from the towns and villages coming into Biggleswade. And I am concerned that there'll be other bus companies that operate on a commercial basis in the future who will be coming up with the same situation. So I welcome the support that Central Beds Council have given, but we do need to ensure that we do have an adequate bus service for our residents and people who want to use the town. But it was I left it deliberately vague in terms of the suggestion for the discussion, so that we could cater for what has occurred in the meantime. So I welcome any observations other councillors have.
Thank you, Councillor Strawn. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. I also welcome the intervention from Central Beds in terms of ensuring that this specific bus service does continue in some way. I think in regards to bus services, we do need a more strategic view for the town, especially with the new interchange, what we just heard about this evening around where commercial areas are expanding, where potentially residential areas are going to expand. So just looking at another bus service in the town, so I don't know how it's commonly called, but the Biggleswade Circular, the 85, there's 11 buses a day on that route. It really isn't a good enough service to provide the connectivity across the town that our residents need and deserve. And I think we need to seek a conversation with Central Beds. And I think it's more than just doing this through the joint committee, although it could be potentially initiated there, to really start looking at strategically at how we can best serve the public transport needs of our residents, both within the town and reaching out into neighbouring towns and villages.
Thank you, Councillor Pullinger. Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of echo Councillor Pullinger's suggestions about a strategic overview of sort of bus services within the town. I think that would be very, very wise. I mean, just a couple of comments on the If I had been at the previous council meeting, I would have raised the issue. So I'm pleased that Councillor Strawn raised it in sort of instead, because I would have done it anyway. So I'm glad somebody else got to it. I mean, I think obviously the new operator of the bus service is as you've said, Mayor, is not a like for like. So in one sense, it is a bit of a degradation of what Stagecoach are offering. I think the main concern I have is that the operator that's due to come in has a reputation of not being particularly reliable on its existing routes, and I think it's something that I know residents have raised and have some concerns about. And also the timings are not quite the same in terms of there are not very many early morning slots, very many late evening slots, which obviously makes people going to work or maybe even going out in early evening or something a bit more difficult. But you know, that's more a Central Beds issue, but it's something we need to be aware of in terms of what our local residents are telling me in terms of a service that's being offered. So I welcome it, but I think we need to keep a close eye on it to make sure that doesn't erode any further.
Thank you. Councillor Knight.
Thank you. So I agree with what other members have said, that I think a strategic review, sorry for the feedback, with Central Beds would be very useful. I mean, it occurs to me part of the reason some of the bus services haven't been sustainable, apart from the increasing costs of fuel and so on, is the lack of adoption and utilisation of the services. And then I think, well, why is that? And actually, it's quite hard to find out how to get a bus from A to B because there are multiple operators. The routes aren't very well promoted. You can't easily pick up a very clear map that shows you the buses that are in operation. If you look at something like the Ivor Sprinter, I tried to work out when that runs, and it's immensely complicated. On different days of the week, it goes to different places on different times. And, you know, you'd have to choose exactly what day of the week to make a specific journey. So it's, I would say, not very accessible. Very few of our bus stops have display boards. So most of the time you walk past one, you've got no idea how long you would have to wait until the next bus. And it would be a fairly significant improvement, I think, if a lot more of our bus stops did have a display that told you there's a bus 3 minutes away, because that would probably inform whether you're going to wait for a bus or maybe try to walk into town if you're able. So I think there's a lot we could perhaps do as a town council, and that Central Beds could do to promote the services that are available, which would ultimately lead to greater utilisation and greater sustainability. And I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Councillor Russell.
Talking about getting bus services to the business parks, what Central Beds were talking about, and I'm sorry to keep referring back to the examination in public, but it was the time when their home farm proposal was discussed in detail, and they were talking about making the buses sustainable by effectively putting a levy on the leases, so that the occupants of the different warehouses and units would be paying long term through their leases for the bus service. And it occurs to me that that's something that actually Tritax could do, and Central Beds through Stratton Business Park could have done, and maybe could do for any expansion in the future. Because at least if those buses are then running partly supported there, it gives a chance for them to be more sustainable around the rest of the town.
Thank you. Councillor Alban.
Thank you. Leading on from what Councillor Knight has just said, a strategy, we do need a strategy, and I think that's a very good suggestion that should be explored. But as far as bus services being difficult to access, and know when buses are coming, and the actual usage of buses. If they were more frequent, then it's more likely that you get the passengers on them to make them actually viable. So the frequency of the service, when they go down to a certain threshold, then they just continue to be a problem. So increase the service, and they'll actually probably become much more viable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ramsey.
Talking about the buses, I was on a bus quite recently, and I asked if I could have a timetable. Do you have a timetable? No. So that was very good. There's not much you could do about that. But when I've spoken to other people about using the buses and the frequency, apparently these people we now got are so unreliable. that if you take the bus down to the market square, that's fine, and you're due to come back at 2:30, and you could well be sitting there at 3:30 because a driver hasn't turned up, or they have decided not to run the bus, which is discouraging people because I think, well, if I go down to the town, am I sure I can get back? So that's, yeah, we should have perhaps smaller buses and doing more frequent runs.
Okay. In a moment, Councillor Strawn. So we've discussed this. We've had a suggestion to discuss this at joint committee because we have to be very careful because this is not this council's responsibility. We've already pushed it quite a bit via TCM in coming up with just an initial plan for what the bus routes around the town centre could look like in and out of the interchange. It looks like the conversation is probably stretching a little wider than that and going to, you know, encapsulating other parts of the town and the villages, etc. I understand from the last joint committee that the next one is going to be a little bit more focused on section 106 to try to make the joint committee just work a bit better and just become a more useful forum. They're going to see whether or not that works. But if it does, then perhaps this is a conversation for the joint committee that follows this one. I know, Councillor Russell, you're Vice Chairman of the Joint Committee. I know Councillor Foster, who is the Chairman, is not here this evening. But if that sounds like a sensible way to proceed, otherwise we're at risk of pushing work towards our officers and not really their responsibility. Councillor Russell.
We have a joint committee meeting on Thursday, and I will ask for it to be put on the forward plan.
And I think that would be very helpful. Are there any last comments? Councillor Ramsey.
Could we as a town council come back to this maybe in 6 months to see how Grant Palmer are settling in and if we think they're providing an adequate service? I know it's not our responsibility.
No, it's okay. You can request it on an agenda in 6 months' time, of course. Yeah, we have a normal way of doing that. Absolutely. Councillor Strawn.
I appreciate that it is not the town council's responsibility, but it is the town's council's responsibility to look after its residents and make sure that the residents get an adequate bus service. So whilst I fully appreciate that it's not our place to interfere in one respect, we have an absolute duty, which is why I felt it was necessary to be on the agenda, to get the local authorities responsible for public transport to be held to account. And I think that was perfectly right and proper. And I like the idea of having a strategy, and it may be something that the chairman of the Town Centre Management Committee might consider having on an agenda in the future, depending on what happens after Thursday's meeting with central beds. But we do have an obligation to our people, regardless of whether it's financial, whether we're the transport authority, but we do need to make sure that our town centre thrives. And I'm not prepared to let the town centre die because of it, and also residents and youngsters, old people need the bus service to get around, get to school, get to work, and we've got to protect that. And if it means that we have to take on challenge central beds on occasions to help support that, then we have to do so.
Thank you. Understood. No, I wasn't for a second suggesting it wasn't worthwhile having on an agenda. I just think we need to make sure that we take this now through the right channels, and it feels like the joint committee is the logical next step. So hopefully that's agreed. Are there any last comments? No. Okay, so we're comfortable that this will be raised at joint committee with the hope that we can have a more focused discussion there with the relevant Central Bedfordshire Council officers, with the look to perhaps a strategy at some point. Item 9B, council and committee meeting dates for members to consider the attached schedule of council and committee meeting dates. Is there anything to add on this? Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So I've got a few concerns and potential corrections to make to this. There's a number of months that don't have 2 council meetings in them, and some things that seem to be out of place. I can go through them quickly. So June 2023 currently only shows 1 council meeting. So I would propose that the 13th of June is a council, the 20th of June would be personnel, and then the 27th of June be a council. Moving on to page 22, the 25th of July should be at 7 p.m.
Yep.
Again, in September, there's only 1 council meeting listed, so I would propose the council meeting should be on the 12th of September with personnel on the 19th.
Yep.
And then on page 23, the annual statutory council is planned for the 7th of May, and this shows us having 3 meetings in May. But of course, the election only takes place on the Thursday that the notice would have to be put out for that meeting. So the annual statutory should be on the 14th and delete the meeting on the 21st.
The annual statutory meeting is always straight after the election.
Okay. Very well. Councillor Russell, I think, well,
my understanding is the old council is in place until the new council takes place at the annual statutory meeting, even after the election. But as I say, if you don't know you're elected when the notice is given for the meeting, that seems quite odd to me.
Okay. So, Tory. So if I summarise, 13th of June council, 20th of June personnel. Got a lot of personnel committee meetings in the middle of the year, if I might say. 13th of June council, 20th of June personnel, 27th of June council, 12th of September council, 19th of September personnel, 14th of May annual statutory meeting. And there's an amendment to one being at 6 and the 25th of July is 7 PM, not 6:30. Okay, Councillor Woodhead.
And it was delete the 21st of May as well.
Yep, delete 21st of May. Thank you. Councillor Woodhead.
Thanks. Yeah, I just want to clarify. Councillor Pullinger, I think, was referring to 2024. I'm not sure there's an election in 2024. So that might
good
be
point. But in that case, it should still be the 14th and the it should still be the 14th and the 28th in any case, because it should be the second.
Yeah, it was just a clarification on that.
Otherwise, it should be the 7th and the 21st and not the 28th. Then,
all right.
In that case,
I think I can be tied.
Thank you.
No,
yeah,
it's
I'm
all right.
Ahead of myself.
No, it's okay. The other point I wanted to raise, we obviously don't know this yet, but clearly the 2nd and 9th of May dates in 2023 could be potentially subject to change, obviously, if there's a bank holiday for the coronation or et cetera, et cetera. So and just something to be aware of, I guess, just thinking ahead, but if there's going to be extra notice days and whatever.
I think Councillor Pullinger's point about the annual statutory meeting following the election still applies to 2023, actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Because the 9th of May wouldn't necessarily be enough time to give notice at 16th of May.
Because of course the election day could change.
Yeah.
So anyway, just something to think about.
As there's no urgency on this, can I make a proposal that officers take away what we've discussed and come back to the next meeting with a...
Is there a seconder for that proposal? Okay. Any final comments? No. All those in favour of deferring this to a future meeting? Taking away those items. Thank you. Item 10, planning applications. 13, South View, demolition of the outbuilding and side building and erect a single-storey rear extension. Comments?
No objections, subject to neighbours.
Subject to neighbours. Any dissent? No. 10B, land to the north of Linzel's level crossing. Councillor Russell. Oh yes, Councillor. You don't have to go. Yeah, okay, go outside if you want, Councillor Bond. There you go, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I'm sorry to have to go through some of this that we went through 2 months ago, but this discharge of planning condition is not where it needs to be. So it's before us for a second time, and it's the landscaping for the bridle bridge at Linzel's Crossing. But again, the proposal is deficient. We know that the bridge will be very intrusive at 41 feet high and will be far from in keeping with the rural landscape. In its decision notice, CBC notes that condition 3 is required to mitigate the visual impact on the surrounding rural area in line with the National Planning Policy Framework, achieving well-designed places and conserving and enhancing the natural environment. We also argued that the condition is required to meet policy EE5 in the local plan, requiring that to safeguard intrinsic character, scenic beauty and perceptual qualities of the landscape, such as tranquility. All development proposals will need to have regard to the key characteristics and sensitivities of the site and its setting. The landscaping plan, which was on the table at the Development Management Committee in July 2021, when the application was approved, showed a tree belt over 30 feet wide, 110 trees encircling the bridge. Planning condition 3 also required larger trees to be planted, irrigation to be put in place, and for any trees which failed within 5 years to be replaced. This scheme was approved by the landscaping officer at the time and was a major reason why planning permission was given. So Network Rail are now asking again for condition 3 to be discharged based on a subsequent landscaping plan. But this one now shows only 3 more trees than the one we looked at 2 months ago. They're smaller trees and there's still no need for irrigation. There's still an issue with the planting to the southeast of the bridge, which still only has 1 tree, so no way would screen the bridge from the housing that's already in place. So it remains totally unethical to gain planning permission on the basis of 1 plan and then substitute not 1, but 2 inferior plans to try and get the planning condition discharged. It's interesting to note that when we raise these issues over the substation, another large project for the town, they not only produced a very good landscaping plan, but predicted the amount of cover that the trees would give in after 10 years. So it can be done and it can be done properly. So given the position of the bridge, its size and its proximity to important open spaces, discharge of condition 3 as now proposed remains flawed and doesn't meet the relevant local plan and national policies. Central Bedfordshire Council should be insisting on implementation of the landscaping plan as approved by DMC. The number of trees originally proposed are needed to properly screen the bridge, and the requirements to ensure that the trees are of a good size, properly established and irrigated are vital. There's been no serious attempt to address our concerns from 2 months ago, and this is another insult in my view. So in view of the importance of all this, I'm afraid I am proposing the same motion that I did at the last council, that the council strongly object to the discharge of planning condition 3 on the second revised plan and demand that Network Rail are obliged to implement the landscaping as per the plan approved at DMC in order to mitigate the visual impact of the bridge.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Yes, several seconders. Councillor Pullinger.
Thank you. So I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Russell's comments, and I think much of what you said there is almost word for word in what was in the letter that we sent to Central Beds in August. I think one of my other concerns, and I don't know whether we ought to specifically include this, is the landscape officer's concerns with the August application was that the trees that were being planted were too large and too mature, and that they wouldn't then be sustained and stay. So the tree sizes have actually been, a number of them I think have been reduced in this. I think Council also makes a very good point that the 2D plan that we have gives no impression of what the elevations would look like, both at the time of planting and also subsequently in 5-10 years time, and that would be very useful. But I think ultimately the points Councillor Russell makes are exceptional ones, in that the planning was agreed on the basis of adequate landscaping, and what has come forward in terms of the discharge of conditions is frankly just not adequate.
Thank you, Councillor Pullinger. Any final comments? Councillor Russell.
Just to say that the larger trees would have been sustainable with irrigation, but they haven't put the irrigation in. So we need the irrigation and the right sized trees so that there's a screen within a suitable period of time rather than 50 years.
Quite right. Any last comments? No, so we are strongly objecting on the grounds that Councillor Russell has laid out, and I'm sure you're comfortable, Councillor Russell, making this wording available to staff so that they can send it word for word to Central Bed. So all those in favour of the proposal? That's everybody, thank you. Could somebody bring Councillor Bond in, please? Item 10C, 17 Lime Tree Walk, proposed part 2-storey and single-storey rear extension, new porch to the front elevation. Any comments? None subject to neighbours? Okay. Item 11A, planning application outcomes. Report on the planning application outcomes as of the 5th of October 2022. Any comments?
Note it.
Note it. Thank you. We've got a lot that are awaiting decision, very few that have been granted, very peculiar. Item 12, accounts. Councillor Pullinger, do you want to comment on these?
Yeah, propose that we accept the reports as listed in the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for the proposal? Any comments? No. All those in favour of adopting the accounts as set out, please show. Thank you. Items for information, 19A High Street, the enforcement case is on hold pending the outcome of planning application. BTC officers have engaged with Central Beds planning officers who are awaiting a decision as of 4th of October. The decision will be referred back to CBC planning enforcement to take the most appropriate course of action. Any comments? No. Are we okay to note this? I think it's ever so important though, and I know a lot of work's been done here by officers to keep this moving, so thank you. Any comments? No, so we note this. 13B, temporary closure, Biggleswade footpath 21. I think the order is included in the agenda. So any comments on footpath closure, Councillor Pullinger?
So just more of a query really. So in practical terms, this is really a closure of the footpath from the Meccano Bridge down to Mill Lane. It goes a lot further, but there is the adjacent footpath all the way down to D from that point.
Yep.
My question is really around alternative routes. So my understanding is there should there not be an alternative route shown down essentially Shortmead Street for the pedestrians that are going from point A down to Mill Lane? And would that not be designated as the alternative route in this case?
I think there normally are alternative routes when it comes to footpath closures, actually, so that's a good point. I don't know what you're proposing. I mean, people will probably have to work that out for themselves, unfortunately, it's the reality. But no, that's a good point and something to note in future, because we don't want footpath closures without an alternative route round. Any other comments? No, so we're okay to note this. Thank you. 13C, as to car parking time reduction, for members' information, the correspondence, this was sent to ASDA, Central Bedfordshire Council and the Biggleswade Chronicle. Councillor Foster.
I refer honourable members to the questions I raised earlier. Have we had any response from CPC? And we haven't. And if we haven't, can we have it put on the agenda, please, for the next meeting and to decide what future action we take? We cannot let this matter slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we had any response yet, Peter Karim? No, we've had no response. That's not good, is it? I think we definitely need some ward councillor intervention here as well, for the record. Councillor Knight.
Yeah, so I think it's reasonable that we wait until the next council meeting in 2 weeks. The letter's dated the 3rd, it's the 11th. So in all likelihood that they haven't had time to respond. I think if we haven't had a response by the next council meeting, I would consider that overdue.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. So is that a request to have this on the next agenda, Councillor Foster? Okay, we can discuss this in more detail then. So if we roll this over and we'll see what has come back from Central Beds by then. And as Councillor Knight says, if we haven't received a response, then we can consider what options are available for us to escalate. Councillor Foster.
Just as a matter of record, of course, the letter that was sent is on page 51 of this set, which isn't mentioned at the point here.
No,
it is page 50.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, it is included. Well worded as well. Any final comments on this? No, so we'll discuss this again in a fortnight. 13D, neighbourhood plan, result of the referendum. We are on tender hooks. I don't know what the result was. Councillor Russell.
Well, you can tell by the big grin on my face, I'm delighted that the neighbourhood plan has reached the final stage. The referendum last Thursday resulted in a yes vote of 83% as against a no vote of 17%. As our MP said to me, a landslide. Now, the turnout was low, at 13.5, but it has been difficult throughout the process to engage with more than a minority of residents. It's not really surprising in that all of us, when we became councillors, struggled to understand the complexities of the planning process. Many of the issues which residents did raise at consultations were ones which cannot be addressed through the planning process, and it was hard to explain the constraints we were working within to produce the plan. The fact that each section had to refer to the context of the National Planning Policy Framework and the local plan also made the document itself rather long and difficult to read. The rules around the referendum were hard to accept in that the town council was forbidden from encouraging a yes vote, and the leaflet which we had printed and distributed had to be purely factual. I wanted to shout vote yes from the rooftops, but was unable to. And being naughty for a moment, I contrasted this with the large sums of money spent by the then government to encourage a no vote in the Brexit referendum. But considering how that referendum went, perhaps I should say no more. All that aside, we have a neighbourhood plan approved at referendum. The plan now has to be made by Central Bedfordshire, which means signing it into planning law. This will be done shortly. So Biggleswade now has a neighbourhood plan against which all future planning applications can be judged, including the major ones of Land North, Land East, and the final phase of King's Reach. We have to get used to referring to the plan, and we need to understand how to make best use of it in responding to planning applications. It's been mentioned at council previously that we may need training, and I'd like to propose that we ask our planning consultant, Dave Chetwin, to do this for us. He has supported other councils in this way. And finally, I'd like to formally thank the members of the strategy group who met twice monthly and stuck with it for 4.5 years. Cliff Andrews and Bedfordshire Rural Communities Charity did great work on the Green Infrastructure Plan and the local green spaces. Tom Price and Eleanor Keep, CBC's Neighbourhood Plan Liaison Officers, were very helpful. And of course, Dave Chetwin of Urban Vision Enterprise kept us on track and actually wrote the plan, ensuring that it meets all legal requirements and that the policies are very clear and indisputable. Now it's down to us to use the plan. So I'm delighted. I hope everybody else is. And I would like to make that formal proposal, if I may, that we ask Dave Chetwin to organise some suitable training for us.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that proposal? There is a seconder, thank you. Any comments? Councillor Strawn.
Yes, I think the training is absolutely essential because now we've got the plan in place. We must make sure that we treat all planning applications in accordance with that plan. So I think the training will be excellent. And I think we should also thank Councillor Russell for the effort she put in chairing that committee over a period of time. And I hate to think the number of weeks, not just days, that she spent on doing it to get it through. So we owe her a great thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think we need to minute that. And congratulations, Councillor Russell. And I think you can reclaim your life now that it's through a huge sigh of relief. Oh, thanks, Jamie. Very much so. Councillor Alban.
Yeah, I agree. Councillor Russell has put an enormous effort into this, and with a good result. And I'm almost loath to say this, but at some point, the plan will need to be looked at again, possibly revised or extended. So we will need the council will need at some point to put a programme in place to do that.
Councillor Russell, did you want to respond to that?
Could I just answer? I am living in dread of two things. First of all, that the government is talking about changing the National Planning Policy Framework, and we would have to see how that affected the neighbourhood plan. And of course, the other thing is that Central Beds have already started to look at the review of their local plan. So there are two things coming from on high. So my immediate response would be, let's just see what happens in the next few months on both those fronts. And then we'll know when we need to start again, or at least review what we've got in place.
Yeah, Good God, thanks for that, Councillor Alban. Councillor Knight.
Two things. So firstly, it became very warm over this side of the room during that round of applause, and I realised it was because Councillor Russell was blushing somewhat. We could feel the radiation. But the point I really wanted to make, I can feel the warmth again now. The point I really wanted to make is in regard to the training. I think we should absolutely do that. I'm sure the costs won't be that high, but I think we should plan to rerun the training shortly after May, because we may have some different members amongst us. So we should, I think, look to run it twice.
Yeah, very good.
I'm happy to accept that as part of the proposal.
I think so. Councillor Bond.
As we're actually making such good progress, and we obviously want to solidify our planning success here, I think we should also now think about putting on the agenda for a future meeting to look at the Article 4 for the for the conservation area in Biggleswade, to see what protection we can also add to it. So one down, another job to do. But the fact is, we have very good planning consultants, and Dave Chedwin, I think, is something we should actually put on the agenda. I'll probably propose that. Doesn't have to come from here. It can be for future week time. Let's give us a small break.
Yeah, let's have a little bit of a break from planning.
But I think it's very important.
It is, and if you want to write in the usual way, you can get that on the agenda if you word a motion accordingly, Councillor Bond. Okay, are there any last comments? No, so we have a proposal to go ahead with or to explore the opportunities around planning training really as soon as we can, but also sometime in May next year. So all those in favour of that proposal, please show. That's everybody. Thanks ever so much. Item 14, we're on to public open session. We will adjourn for 15 minutes if we need to, but if we don't, we won't. No one's joined us. Anyone joined online? No, we won't then. Perfect. Item 15, exempt items. So it's advisable that we move into exempt session. Would somebody just move that? Are we comfortable moving into exempt? Is that all right? Move it? Any dissent? No, so we move into exempt. Thank you.